right off the bat, I just want to learn. Also, a long time coming. Yeah, we got Christian on the podcast. Let's go.
All right.
How would you explain crypto to someone that's in the simplest terms?
Yeah, the best way to explain it, like cryptocurrency and the blockchain, is that the blockchain is just like a list of transactions. It's a ledger of transactions between accounts. So Mo, if you were to send 10 Bitcoins to Jesse, and then later Jesse sends 10 Bitcoins to Evan, each transaction is being recorded on the blockchain. The Bitcoin blockchain, there's a block every 10 minutes or so. And so all these transactions go into a pool, and then every 10 minutes, they're organized into a block, and those blocks are stacked on top of each other. A good way to think about this is like, have you ever used a Google spreadsheet, which like everyone can work on at the same time?
You can put their input and write down and edit.
So the Bitcoin network is like if everyone had their computer open and they're all on the same Google spreadsheet. And so everyone can see all the transactions that are happening. It's fully public. And every time a new transaction is added, it's like you're adding a new line and you can see the full list of transactions. And let's say someone was like a bad actor and they wanted to say, oh, I'm going to try and like steal his Bitcoin. So I'm going to erase Mo's name and put in my name. You're going to put in DefiSenpai. And other people will see that because it's a shared ledger and they're going to say, no, that's wrong. And through consensus, which is kind of like a democratic process, they're going to say that this is a faulty transaction and they're going to replace it again with the original transaction, which was your name. Yeah, on a very like basic level, that's kind of how the blockchain operates.
And so every single transaction that's ever been made and will ever be made, it will be going into the blockchain.
You mean that have been made?
Have been made.
Yeah.
And
get recorded on the blockchain.
Be recorded on the blockchain.
Absolutely. And you can look that up and it's fully transparent.
Okay, so what's the point of the blockchain? What is it?
So it provides transparency to money. Bitcoin is very different from like other cryptocurrencies. Like Bitcoin, the goal is to essentially replace the monetary system that we currently have in place, which is, controlled by the Federal Reserve, and they can decide how much money, like at the flick of a switch, deciding to print $1 trillion more to fund whatever war is going on in the world, right? Like there's a reason why inflation is popping off right now, and that, houses in Vancouver now cost multi-million dollars, whereas 20 years ago, under $500K. And this is all due to monetary, and people can make up their excuses for like, oh, it's like foreigners coming in, buying stuff up. People can make up excuses, but really it all has to do with monetary policy, manipulating interest rates, and how that results in like just how people view money and the financialization of certain assets like houses.
What I'm trying to understand with Bitcoin and crypto in general is that what is so great about it and what is so revolutionary with it? Because a lot of people, there's two sides to it. A lot of people don't believe in it, obviously, because they're a few, from what I've heard before, is there's no backing to crypto. There's no actual there's no backbone to crypto. Crypto can just completely get wiped off the face of the earth one day and it'll be the end of it. But then there's another side of it where there's a lot of people that do believe that it will take the place of
the current
currency.
monetary.
Yeah, the current.
Yeah, it'll replace like the US dollar essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, people who say it's like backed by nothing, I feel like they haven't really done enough like research into like what it is. Like, okay, like it's not gonna just like evaporate and stop existing one day. Right now, they're being like heavily scrutinized by the SEC, which is the Securities Commission in the US. But it's like, even if you try and prevent people from, like buying it and stuff, like it's still going to exist. Miners are still going to mine it. You can still do transactions across borders.
Why do you believe in crypto and why do you like it?
I studied like econ and finance in university. And in fourth year, I started to dive pretty deep into the 2008 financial crisis, the causes and the consequences in the end. So in the US, there's this organization called the Federal Reserve. They control the flow of money in the economy, and like by controlling the interest rates, they make the interest rate decisions. And for years and years after the 2008 financial crisis, right, they dropped interest rates down to zero. Now that has like a very important effect on just the entire economy, how the world operates. For one thing, right, if you try and buy a house, you get a mortgage, If interest rates are really low, then you're going to be able to leverage yourself up. You're going to be able to buy these really expensive mansions because you have such a low interest rate. You can do it with like a lower salary. And so that's what people have been doing in Vancouver for quite a while now, right? They've been leveraging themselves, getting tons of properties with just the bare minimum amount of money down. And
because the interest rates are so low.
Are really low.
Right.
And it was like that for basically 10 years, from 2008 to like basically 2018. And they started hiking interest rates recently. That was only very recently. And it's probably going to unravel terribly. But because interest rates were so low, it fueled the economy. Certain things, I guess, like tech startups, because they could borrow so much money, they flourished. Because, you pay so little interest on the debt that's outstanding. Same with the government. They could borrow money and they're paying very little interest on the debt that's outstanding. Now, some people will look at this and they say, oh, this system's like totally broken. You can't have interest rates that low. Like, who in the right mind would lend $1 million at 0.5% interest? You only pay me $50,000 on $1 million I lend you. No one would do that, right? But the government manipulated interest rates to allow that. Bitcoin, the beauty of it is that it's the only thing in the world which has, perfect transparency and a set total supply. There's not a single asset out there that even, holds a candle to it. You could say, oh, well, what about gold? Like, that's the purpose of gold. There's only a set amount of gold. No one really knows how much gold is in the world, right? And every once in a while, you hear stories about, like, people unwrapping a gold bar and it's just, like, gold-wrapped zinc, Like, there's this ETF that trades on, like, the NASDAQ. I forget what it is. It's like the gold something. I used to buy it. But it's like, you're trusting that somewhere in Paris there's a vault which contains all this gold, and you're trading a stock, stock ticker, which represents, a tenth of a kilo of gold in a vault somewhere in Paris. And you're wondering, and like, you start to think like, is there actually anything in there? Or is it just bullshit? Because if I was working in Paris, like guarding that vault, like I'd probably, you swap one out every once in a while and all of a sudden you're a millionaire. I'm not saying, okay, I wouldn't do that, but it's definitely possible.
Yeah.
Bitcoin, everything is on this global public ledger that you can see every single transaction.
And there's a set amount to it.
Yeah, and there's a set amount, exactly.
How much is that amount?
So in the future, there will be 21 million Bitcoin. That's the total amount in existence.
Maximum cap.
That will ever exist. Exist. Right now, I think there's like 18 point something, or maybe it's 19 million Bitcoin in circulation. And every time a new Bitcoin block is mined, more Bitcoin are put into circulation.
Okay, so a few things here. All right. You said 21 is the cap.
Yes.
Why 21? And 2, you said mining Bitcoin, like when Bitcoin is being mined. What does that mean, and what is the purpose of that, and who actually mines the Bitcoin?
Sure. So 21 million, I'm pretty sure just like an arbitrary number. I've never actually like looked into why they picked 21 million. But the way it works is that it's disinflationary, right? There's deflationary where things are going down, but disinflationary means there's more Bitcoin coming into existence, but at a slower rate over time. So there's some really important cycles to understand in Bitcoin. When it first came into existence in 2009, it was like 50 Bitcoin per block. And a block's every 10 minutes, right? A new block is being added to the blockchain. And
this is ongoing every 10 minutes.
Yes, every 10 minutes. And then about 4 years later, there was this event called the halving where the block rewards get cut in half. And so it went to 25 Bitcoins per block. And then to 12.5, then to 6.25. And the next halving is going to be in April 2024 when it's going to go down to 3.125 Bitcoins per block. Mm-hmm. That's how many Bitcoin will come into existence every 10 minutes.
Every 10 minutes, yeah.
So it's disinflation. If you look at the graph of the total supply of Bitcoin, it's going to look like this over time. And it eventually converges at 21 million, I think it's like 100 years from now or something, in which case the network is incentivized to operate only off the rewards from transactions. So every time a transaction is sent, there's a cost to it, right? If I send you 1 Bitcoin, I'm going to end up spending like 0.00001 Satoshi or something like that. That's what I think like a billionth of a Bitcoin is called, to send that transaction to you. And that reward goes to the miners. So the mining thing is like, it's not named as accurately as it could. So miners are more like tellers at a bank, where, you go to a teller at the bank and you tell them to send this amount of money to someone else like David or something.
Right.
What they're doing is there's just these machines called ASIC machines, meaning they only do one single function really well, and they run this software which, mines Bitcoin. The way you can think of it is like, have you ever been to a hotel and they have those like vaults where it's like, you put your keys in or something like that,
Passport,
and then
keys, yeah.
you punch in a code and it locks, right? And let's say you walked into a random motel and you're trying to unlock one of these things and you're just punching in random numbers. And eventually, you're going to get it right. If there's only 4 numbers, you could try it 9,999 times and eventually it's going to unlock. So I like to think of, Bitcoin mining is something similar, except you have all these machines doing the exact same thing. They're trying to punch in the code to unlock the door to get the Bitcoin inside, right? And the more machines you have running on the grid, the faster it's actually going to do it. The faster they're going to unlock, right? If you have 9,999 machines doing this, that means if they all punch one in, 1 second, boom, it's going to open up. You're going to get the Bitcoin out. For that reason, the more machines that are on the network running this code, the more complicated the lock is. Instead of a 4-digit lock, let's say it's like an 8-digit lock, right?
Right.
And so the difficulty changes so that it's around 10 minutes per block. And the more machines that are running on the network, the more secure it is. The more secure the network is as well.
Okay. So this is what causes the every 10-minute, what do you call it again? The
new block is mined every 10 minutes.
Every 10 minutes. And that is what's causing that to happen. These machines punching in these codes or whatever.
Basically. Yeah. They're running an algorithm.
Right.
Yeah. That's how I like to think about how it operates. I know it's not like 100% accurate, but I hope that...
No, that makes sense.
Yeah. And the more machines running on the network, the more secure it's going to become. So like the way that someone would attack Bitcoin through this thing called a 51% attack. If you controlled 51% of the machines on the network, like you'd be able to like, inject like a faulty transaction and you'd be able to like basically force it to go through because you control, the majority of the machines. You're telling them all to agree on this false transaction. And so that's why the more amount of machines you have on the network, the more secure it is. Because we're assuming that these machines are being deployed by like different people, right? It's decentralized. It's a decentralized network.
Right.
As opposed to one person with all the machines. And that could be a potential like issue in the future, right? If there was just one organization like the US government decides to go ham on mining, that's how they would honestly destroy Bitcoin, is if they just decided to invest trillions of dollars into making these machines and then just like persistently force 51% attacks. Yeah.
Okay.
But that would be so costly and it would be so obvious as well. Because we could still look at, like even though machines might be doing it wrong, humans would still look at this and they would fork the network. They would just like, okay, well, we're just going to go back to this block and then restart it. So it'd be almost like a futile effort to try and do that. And it would cost the US government or whatever organization was trying to attack the network, trillions of dollars in energy and hardware to try and attack the network like that.
What do you mean by attack? Like, I'm trying to understand what you mean. Like
attack is in like put in a fake transaction, like put in a faulty,
a faulty
or a false transaction, okay. Right? So if I sent, 5 Bitcoin to Jesse, and then you're the attacker and you say, oh, actually, I don't want that money to go to Jesse. I want it to go to me.
Oh,
so you put in like the wrong transaction. Right. Usually 99.9% of machines would be like, well, that's not right. And they'd be able to
This is supposed to go to Jesse, not to Mo.
Yes. Yep. They'd be able to spot that right away. But if you controlled 51% of the network, you could force that transaction through, right?
Holy shit.
But the thing is, there's so many machines running, and the electrical cost of actually doing that is insane, right? That no one would try to do it. And that's why it's so secure.
Is that a side that people don't know about Bitcoin? Like the machine part where it's controlling all the mining and all the...
Well, I think everyone kind of knows about it. It's because it's just like software, right?
Yeah,
it's like totally open source. Anyone can download it, run a validator.
Right. I come up to you and I say, "Hey, Christian, I wanna invest into Bitcoin and crypto."
Okay.
What do I do? Why would I do it? How much would I put in? And what do I expect from it? Right? Like if I come up to you and I give you however much money and I say, I give you $50,000 and I say, Christian, take my money and invest it into crypto and Bitcoin. What would you suggest? Right? Like what?
Yeah. I mean, I can't like give like financial advice, but I will say.
Or if I came up to you and said, crypto and Bitcoin is bullshit. Change my mind. Right? Like,
Yeah.
because I'm still trying to like understand why why you like it so much.
Yeah,
Why
I think there's a lot of anger out there in society that is not pointed at the right direction right now. You know, it's misdirected anger is what I'm trying to say. And I think a lot of that is due to financial stress. For me, the way I view it, like I view like a lot of these problems, as stemming from a broken financial, like monetary policy, which comes from the Federal Reserve in manipulating interest rates and then just like printing money to fund things like the military industrial complex and that sort of thing, as opposed to, you know, trying to spend it on like healthcare or like education, lowering the costs, all that sort of stuff. Bitcoin is like a big FU to like the system. It's like you're opting out of the system. It's kind of like anarchy, to be honest. Yeah. You're betting on the government kicking the can down the road, lowering interest rates even lower so that you can, so that they can continue to fund their never-ending wars, right? And whatever, like, you know, unnecessary government programs they're funding. And what they're going to do is it'll continue to destroy the value of the Canadian dollar or US dollar, wherever you are.
So you're saying Bitcoin's actually better for people, for most of society?
Yeah.
It'll be a better substitute for it. It'll decrease financial stress tremendously.
The way you can view the price of Bitcoin is not it appreciating in value as opposed to just the US dollar or the Canadian dollar losing value. Because you look at like what a dollar might have bought you 20 years ago versus today. It's like the difference is shocking, right? And they say, oh, it's inflation, things are getting more expensive. Or you can think of it as your dollar is just worth less. And Bitcoin, there's no greater representation of that than Bitcoin, which is like purely you're opting out of the system. You're trying to hold on to the value as much as possible. And because it has these very unique properties in that it's fully transparent, in that, you know, we know the supply, we've seen we know all the transactions. It's the only real hard currency in the world. I think people don't understand that, you know, most currencies have only lasted like 50 to 60 years before they collapse. The US dollar used to be backed by gold, like physical. $1 was like you could like exchange it for physical gold, and that was written on the US dollar. They changed that. I think it was like August 20th or August 10th, 1970. Under Richard Nixon, it was just announced on like on the television. People didn't really think much of it, but all of a sudden they got rid of the gold standard, and that was to fund. This was the first time that the US were trying to like do like 3 wars at the exact same time. This was like kind of during like Vietnam, and of course the printing press just went off. You can look at the total supply of the US dollars, and it's just like a vertical, you know, exponential curve. They just started printing money to fund these never-ending wars. And so I'd say that would be the end of the US dollar as kind of like a hard currency. And then it became this fiat currency, which means just backed by nothing. And so you can think of the US dollar as only really being, I guess, if that was 1970, it'll only really be about 50 years old or something at this point, right?
Right.
And it's only going to continue to lose value. Yeah.
And Bitcoin is going to continue to keep its value or increase.
Yeah, but that's just it's going to be a reflection of the US dollar losing value. So
it's connected to the US dollar losing value for Bitcoin to increase in value.
Like, in a sense, in a way, for sure.
Why?
I guess it is. It is all supply and demand.
Dude, I'm so fucking like, I don't know about you, Alex, but I'm really trying to understand. No, it's not your fault, man. It's just I'm such a fucking idiot and caveman to this shit.
Dude, you're asking questions, which means you're learning.
Yeah, I'm trying to. I'm gonna fucking re-listen to this 76 times.
So I mean, I'm not doing a great job explaining this either. I'll be honest, because crypto is a very like nuanced subject where you need to understand a lot of things, like geopolitics, politics, economics, kind of like cybersecurity a little bit. You need to know about like tech and software. You need to be like pretty well rounded. To like, I'm not saying you aren't.
No, yeah, no.
But like, you definitely need like a basic understanding of like a lot of different topics and even like game theory to like really understand and get the full big picture about why this is going to take off and how it's like basically programmed to, you know, do well in the future. Although I will say that crypto and Bitcoin, two very different things. Right.
Very different things, yeah.
Yeah, because anyone can launch a shit coin. Anyone can launch like a new, like a copy of Ethereum. and I'm sure it'll do well initially, but in the long run, like there's very, very few like coins are actually going to make it, right? There's, in my opinion, it's like Bitcoin and ETH, and that's it, right? Everything else is probably just going to go to shit.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think Bitcoin and Ethereum are going to blow up and continue to blow up?
Part of it is just being early. Bitcoin was the very first, like, it was like the first one to like really take off. And then Ethereum was the first crypto which incorporated the virtual machine on it. So you could use smart contracts in your, like, in crypto, like when you do transactions. So I could have like, you could have like smart money in a sense. If I were to, like, let's say, hand a bunch of money to like the homeless people on the east side, it's like through Ethereum, maybe you could give them like a special token, which is only spendable at grocery stores, which would guarantee that they're not going and just buying meth with it or something like that, right? So it's like programmed smart money. Mm-hmm. Or you could set up a contract, which is like, okay, well, I am employing this guy, Adam, to do my videos, and I want to pay him like the first of the month for the next year. And so you could just put that money into a smart contract, and then the first of the month, it would just send him that $100 or something like that. Bitcoin's a bit limited in that it's really good as like a hard currency, but it doesn't have like smart contracts natively in it. Don't quote me on that, but I've yet to see them. And
So the idea I'm getting is that what you said about the US dollar and how gold used to back it up, but then when they stopped using gold to back up the US dollar, it started losing value throughout time.
Yes.
But what you're
very intentional though, right?
Very intentional.
Yeah.
Right.
To fund programs.
To fund programs.
Because there's a deficit. They can only, if you only have enough currency, which is like backed by a certain amount of gold in your thing, it's like you're limiting your growth, right? You can only spend so much.
But then again, you don't know how much gold there is in the world. So why would they?
Well, they had gold. No, they had gold in the vaults. So
okay,
it's like,
so whatever was in the vault is what they
had, and on the dollar you could literally see like it's redeemable for X grams of like gold and stuff like that.
Right. Okay.
I think it's something like that. I have to like double check on that. But yeah, it was redeemable for a certain amount of gold.
Right.
And so, if they wanted to continue to fund these things, pretty much the military-industrial complex, which is the largest expenditure when it comes to government spending.
Okay.
They had to either get a bunch of more gold randomly, or they just say, all right, screw this, we're done with the gold standard, and we're just going to continue to print money.
Right, okay.
Yeah, prior to then, other currencies were also, other world currencies were pegged to the US dollar as well. So in a sense, they were also kind of on the gold standard. And after that, that's when foreign exchange really came into existence. There were foreign exchange markets where everything all of a sudden was like, the New Zealand dollar would fluctuate in value relative to the US dollar. And so that's when like everyone just went ham on the printers and things really took off. And, that's why you can look at the things like housing prices, just go like psycho after that period.
Right. Okay, so that actually brings me, so just to re-ask that question.
Sure.
Gold, as we knew, was the gold standard for US dollar, and it gave the US dollar some sort of backing, some sort of substance for some backing.
Yeah.
So for Bitcoin or crypto, what is its backing? Why, like, you know what I'm trying to ask now? Like, what gives crypto that credibility of it being valuable for someone to even invest or do a transaction with? Like, what backs crypto? I don't know if you already answered this.
No, I mean, it is just like all the properties that it has of like the transparency, that all the supply. That is what backs it. But also the electricity that goes into the entire network and running it, right? In a sense, that
the production
that also,
of it almost.
Yeah, that also is backing it, because that's the security behind the network. Like for Bitcoin to, go to zero, like so many people say, that would mean, in my opinion, the entire network like shutting down, which wouldn't happen, right? Because it's decentralized. It's not like it's all in one place being mined. It's around the world. Everyone's participating. Like, not everyone, but there's a lot of people participating in mining it. So for Bitcoin to go to zero, all of them would have to shut off their miners all at the same time, which is not going to happen.
I have a question. Do you follow what the Canadian government is doing? Are they interested in implementing some version, probably not Bitcoin, but some version of digital currency? Is that the future? Is that something that like eventually the Canadian dollar is going to go away and we're going to have some form of
CBDC?
Okay.
Central bank digital currency, and they absolutely will exist. In 10 years' time, I'm sure everyone's going to be using CBDCs, whether they know it or not. They'll be interacting with the blockchain. It'll be on a separate blockchain, right? It won't be on the Bitcoin blockchain. They'll deploy their own like private network, but it won't have the properties that Bitcoin will, right? They'll still be able to like, just because it's on a blockchain doesn't mean you can't like, if they make their own private one, they can also set the rules, and they can decide to, create as many Canadian digital dollars as they want, right? So it doesn't solve the problem of like being a hard currency. It just means it's on the blockchain. It'll make it easier for transacting across borders, but it'll also make it a lot easier for them to tax you. And I actually believe that's why all these countries are pushing for CBDCs, is so that, people won't be able to hide money offshore anymore, which is a good thing, right? And they'll be able to shut down drug trade, which is also a good thing. But they'll also be able to implement, if the interest rates go negative, they'll be able to take money directly out of your bank account, right? Yeah. So it's like, and I actually believe that's the direction we're going to end up going eventually. Like when interest rates do drop, I think it will eventually go negative. And the reason negative interest rates haven't worked in places like, I think it's like Denmark that tried them, is because you can just take your money out of the bank and then they won't charge you, like it's hard for them to like track it and charge you interest rates anymore. But if it's all on the blockchain, they'll be able to take that money right from you. We also saw during the Canadian, what was that trucker thing?
The
In Ottawa?
like the protest.
Yeah, I mean, like Trudeau invoked like the terrorist act or something like that, and he was actually shutting down bank accounts of people that were, funding the truckers. People can say what they like whether they agree with what the truckers were doing or not, but I definitely saw that as an extreme. It's like he was like, literally, if you donated like $100 to a GoFundMe, they were shutting down like credit cards, bank accounts. It was way over the top, just in my opinion. Like, it was insane.
Yeah.
It's like, if he's going to do it for something as small as that, I don't know what's going to happen, but maybe something more serious happens in the future. It's like with CBDCs, absolutely, they'd be able to confiscate your money and take away your ability to transact. But I think for sure, like the negative interest rates is the larger reason of why they would want to implement this.
But with a CBDC, it's a blockchain and there's a limited amount, right? There's going to be a limited amount with that as well. Like there is
Not
with
necessarily.
Bitcoin. Not necessarily.
Yeah.
Because I was just thinking, I was like, some people are just not going to be part of it. Like some people are just not going to have any fucking CBDC
and that's why
money.
Like crypto is different from like Bitcoin. Bitcoin, it's like it's in the algorithm, and every time a new block is mined, it's like confirming that this is the total amount of Bitcoin that will be in existence. It's like a rule that's basically been programmed into it. But you can have blockchains without that stuff.
Unlimited amount of CBDC, crypto, or crypto.
I'd have to think about how it would operate. It might work in that they have a blockchain and that it's just like a token on the blockchain, which is the currency, like the CBDC, in which case, they just have like full power over controlling the supply and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So there's a lot more flexibility when you like deploy your own private blockchain network.
During the pandemic, I remember there was a point where, Bitcoin nosedived to a crash landing.
It did.
I was a part of it. I fucking invested because of FOMO,
Congrats.
I said, fuck it, why not?
Yeah.
But it was short-lived. It fucking crashed. What are your thoughts on that one? Do you remember that crash? Because it came down to like 65,000. It was around the 60,000.
Hit like 3K or something like that.
3,000?
Very briefly.
Jesus fuck.
Very briefly. Yeah, I mean, that was like a wild crash. I was working at the bank at the time and people were coming in like panicking. It was just everything was crashing at the same time because there was a lot of unknowns about COVID and what the implications were. We knew that, China had basically shut down the entire economy. Everything is made in China. We're like, oh shit, like what are the ramifications going to be on everything else? And so a lot of it was just like FUD, fear, uncertainty, doubt, and everything was getting sold off. And Bitcoin as it exists today is definitely like a risk on asset where it's like, if the S&P or the NASDAQ is doing well, it's gonna trade at like a multiple, so it's gonna do even better. So if like let's say the NASDAQ goes up like 2% tomorrow, Bitcoin might go up like 3% or something, you know?
So it is related to the
Right
NASDAQ.
Right now. Well, there's a relationship in the price, but it's not like the same thing, right? So it's going to trade with like a positive beta, unless like right now, in which case there's like a lot of FUD around crypto because like they're trying to regulate it pretty heavily in the US, and so people are a little bit scared.
Why are they trying to regulate it?
They see it as a threat. Yeah.
Threat to the US dollar?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. They're trying to frame it as a way to like kind of skirt taxes or like fund criminal activity. But in reality,
But isn't that happening to some extent? Maybe a small percentage, but
very small, I would say very, very small, because it's so much easier to do all that stuff with just US dollars, right? Whenever you find these like Mexican drug cartels, it's not like they're holding a shit ton of Bitcoin. They've got like they're like sleeping on like a mattress of cash, like US dollars. That stuff's totally untraceable. Yeah.
Right. So Bitcoin is part of the blockchain, so you'll see it. It's out there.
Yeah.
That's what you mean.
There was this crazy thing.
Yeah, I'm getting there.
There was this crazy thing that like happened like a couple months ago. Didn't really get any sort of coverage. There was like a secret Bitcoin billionaire who had stolen money from this thing called the Silk Road over 10 years ago. Silk Road was one of the first like applications that used Bitcoin to like its full extent of like they were like, you know, buying and selling drugs online like marijuana. And this guy had hacked Silk Road and he managed to steal like a couple thousand Bitcoin, right? And Silk Road eventually got taken down by the FBI under like kind of questionable conditions. But because those stolen Bitcoin were still like out there, like 10 years later, the FBI managed to track this guy down, probably tortured him, and recovered, I think like it was like 50,000 Bitcoin or something like that. So it's like 10 years later, I mean, like they're still able to catch these people because it's all public records. And this guy made some mistake. He probably funded some public wallet like that's attached to his personal identity. And they were able to, you know, trace back those transactions and eventually catch him. So the idea that, you know, people are using Bitcoin for illicit activity, like that shit all catches up. US dollars,
that's the thing.
Way more like crime is going to happen with US dollars.
Right. Yeah, with Bitcoin, dude, I have this like picture in my head where it's like this network of like electrodes all over the place, and it's a different dimension, and you can find all of them.
Yeah.
Right. It's like a universe, like a different type of universe, and that's that's the picture in my head I have of it. Right.
Yeah.
Why are people still skeptical about it? Why isn't everyone investing in crypto and Bitcoin if it's such an amazing thing? Yeah.
There's like I said before, it's just like it requires like a basic knowledge of so many different topics.
Yeah, basic knowledge. Fuck.
It's just like it's hard to see the big picture and where we're gonna end up in the future. You need a little bit of foresight to kind of like see the patterns, kind of realize we're stuck in the system, and that Bitcoin is a bit of like, and you need to have like a bit of like anarchist inside you to like believe that it's gonna be like the future of.
I think the problem is it's too nerdy, it's too technical for the average person to figure out. I think that's what it ultimately boils down. And if you can't explain that in layman's terms to somebody, they're just to get buy-in on that, it's going to be very, very challenging.
100%, I agree.
Yeah. You wouldn't encourage someone that doesn't know much about, like you said, geopolitics, politics, economy.
No, I would, absolutely. Like, I'd encourage them to learn and seek answers for themselves, because that's the only way they're really going to find that belief. If you just go off what someone else is saying, because I think you'll be disappointed, and you'll probably end up selling when shit hits the fan, right? Like, just like this most recent crash, I'm sure a lot of people sold when Bitcoin bottomed at like, I think it was like 15K briefly. I'm sure a lot of people sold, right? They probably bought at 64K, sold the bottom because they didn't believe in the real, you know, mission and like where it's going to be 3-4 years from now. Yeah. I mean, I would never recommend investing more than you can afford, right? Because then you have emotions attached to your investments. That's never a good idea.
Mm-hmm. Well, why did it bottom out this recent time?
Interest rates started going up, right?
Right.
This is the first time in years, like I think it's something like from a year ago, interest rates in Canada are up like 19x. Right? That's crazy. What essentially happened is a giant margin call on the entire economy. And in the past year, we've seen three of the four largest bankruptcies in history. Like, wild. If the Federal Reserve wasn't there to backstop all of this shit, we would absolutely be in a 2008 type situation right now. But instead, they're using these like infinite lines of credits to fund basically like JP Morgan, like buying all of these banks which are going bankrupt and would have defaulted on all their loans. But instead, they're all consolidating into the larger banks. And part of me is like, is this being done intentionally, or are they just like, they just don't know what they're doing? You know? I like to lean towards like, this is an intentional consolidation, and this is like an intentional margin call on the economy, the purpose of which it's really hard to figure out why they would choose to do this. Like, yes, inflation is bad, but you can lie about those numbers, and they've been lying about it for decades, right? Part of inflation is very much psychological, in the sense that if you say prices are going up, people start to believe that narrative that prices are going up, and they get more submissive when they see things like the price of a bag of chips going up at the grocery store. They say, oh, well, it's just inflation. Everything's going up. It's like acceptable. And there's been a lot of companies that have taken advantage of this, and we're seeing record profits on their, when they do financial reporting.
All the grocery stores are getting flat. I mean, over like
Shell, like all the gas companies.
Yeah.
There's absolutely people who are taking, they're seeing the biggest profits in years, and we're supposed to believe this is all because of inflation and not because they're being greedy and taking advantage of the situation that's being caused by like, this basically the mainstream media and the government repeating the same message of inflation is crazy, we need to get it under control. But if they just like lied about it, like I feel like they've been doing for years, and just saying, oh, inflation is low, then I feel like people would be more upset if they saw these prices going up, and they would be less willing to take it from all these companies, which are absolutely price gouging.
Okay, so inflation is not a thing.
No, I mean, it exists, but I think that's part of it, a large part of it, is psychological. And Jerome Powell, like the head of the Federal Reserve, has even referenced this in a lot of his speeches, in that it's psychological, and that you need to get a hold of basically the broad narrative that inflation is slowing down and cooling down for prices to actually come down. You need people to believe in that message. I know that's like kind of bizarre to think about, but it's not as simple as just more money.
Why what entails believing that message? Right? Like, is that going to the store, looking at a bag of chips that have increased by $3 in the past year and saying, oh, well, fuck, whatever.
I think a lot of it is just the message from the government. Like, organizations saying, oh, inflation is cooling down, we're on the right track.
Right, but what would people do differently if they were to believe that inflation is cooling down? You know what I mean?
They would probably start spending a bit more, I guess. Yeah. But
wouldn't that also work in the hands of the companies and the government by wanting to be greedy? Because we're paying anyways, right? We're spending that money anyways. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, I'm trying to understand.
Yeah. So the relation, I think what you're struggling with here is that, like...
yeah, no, I am struggling.
The difference,
no, 100%.
Like, so inflation and interest rates have like an inverse relationship. And that's how the government rationalizes increasing interest rates. Oh. So when inflation is high, the government says they have to increase interest rates so that people start spending less and they start saving more money.
Right.
It has a cooling down effect. And when inflation is lower, they can rationalize lowering interest rates so that people can start to leverage up more, in a sense. They can continue to, buy more stuff. So what's happened is inflation started to increase post COVID-19, that whole era, and the government saw this increase in inflation as a way to rationalize increasing interest rates. And that increasing interest rates essentially is a giant margin call on the entire economy. Tech companies, which a lot of them don't really have any sort of profits, they just have like revenue, and they're like funded by these like VCs and companies which just give them a lot of money because they want to see growth. Like, they had to start like chopping a lot of people. They start laying off people. They're trying to become profitable,
Right.
And so a lot of tech companies were in a lot of shit. That's kind of what we saw, like Silicon Valley Bank. It's like somewhat related to that. That's one of the banks that went under. A lot of people tried to like pull out all their money all at once, basically caused like a whole bank run.
with something like, I remember during COVID or a little bit after COVID and around 2021, I remember some world leader or someone famous said something about COVID. I think they supported it or said something like would something like, you know, LeBron James saying, "Oh, I love Bitcoin, I love crypto." Wait, did I say COVID?
Yeah, he said COVID there.
Did I say COVID? Oh my god.
Okay.
What I meant was crypto.
Okay.
Bitcoin. Holy shit. My mind is just fucking lights out, man.
Sorry, man.
No, it's cool. So if someone like LeBron James, like I said,
Yeah.
was to come out and say, "I love Bitcoin, I'm investing this much money in crypto and Bitcoin," would crypto shoot up? Would something like that? Like, that's the only...
Probably. Yeah. It might help like a little bit. It won't shoot up. I mean, it's so big at this point, the market cap's so large. That's like someone saying like, "Oh, if I invest in Apple," like LeBron saying he's invested in Apple, people will be like, "Okay, cool." You know, it's like so big, it wouldn't make a
Right, it
difference.
wouldn't, yeah.
I mean, maybe someone like Warren Buffett, like one of the richest people in the world. Yeah, I mean, the market cap of Bitcoin is still relatively small. I think it's like 600, 500 billion. It's
Oh, that's
there's multiple companies.
That's pennies. I think that's
It is. There's multiple companies that are multi-trillion at this point, right?
Fuck.
And so if you think about that, it's like I think it's like Disney is like the same market cap of like Bitcoin or something. I don't quote me on that, but it's like similar to the point where it's like, wow, here's like a system, and the amount of smart people that are working in like the crypto industry,
Yeah.
and like how revolutionary it is, and all the things that could potentially lead to in the future has the same market cap as, you know, The Little Mermaid or whatever that show is.
Yeah. Tarzan.
Tarzan,
Iron Giant.
And that's why, like, you know, even though Bitcoin is like 12 or so years old at this point, 13 years old, it's like, it's still relatively early.
Really new.
Into,
It's
like,
a baby
the-
still, right?
Yeah.
Would you say? Yeah.
Yeah. And to how like profound the idea is and
No.
the actual implications. Like, if this bet is like true, and like if this is what's going to happen, then it's going to be
Yeah.
gigantic, right? We could see, you know, potentially $1 million Bitcoin one day in our lifetime. Crazy. And yeah, like, to be honest, like, I've never like had a really like good paying job either. A lot of it has been through like trading of shitcoins and that sort of thing. There's this idea that investing in these like Ethereum copies and other shitcoins, that you can get rich that way by owning like 1 million or like 1 billion of like Pepe coin or like Shiba Inu and that sort of thing. But I think the reality is that like Bitcoin and ETH have been around for so long. It's like all the wealth has been very much like dispersed, in that like it's really like decentralized in terms of like the actual holdings of the coins. But whenever one of these new coins comes up, like, you know, EOS or AVAX, they're so heavily centralized in some of these teams. Like, you can't launch a new currency and have 20% or even like 30% owned by VCs. Like, that's never going to become an actual currency, right? It'll always be just like a novelty, and these people are just using that money to dump on your faces every time they and more of their coins get unvested or get vested. It's like, I think a lot of people just don't understand that.
Yeah.
In that, like, Bitcoin, when it first came out, it was like you could
don't understand that.
you
Fuck.
could only get
Damn it, man.
dude, it's
Get with the program, man. People
dude,
need to know.
it is very simple. It is honestly very simple. You can't launch a currency
I
where
agree, dude.
40% of it is held by VCs and the founders. Like,
What's
that's not
VCs?
gonna,
What's VCs?
venture capital.
Oh, okay.
So like the people that just like initially funded these projects.
Right.
And there's a lot of them, right? Like, Facebook tried to launch like a Libra coin at one point. It didn't actually take off, but the team split into two other teams. One called like Aptos, the other one's called like Sui. And these guys raised, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars. And sure, even though the technology is kind of cool and they've got some really cool aspects to them, and like maybe they're using like an innovative new, faster programming language in which these coins run on, it's like the actual concentration of those coins is so deep in the pockets of early investors, it's never gonna like any sort of like buys into those coins, you're literally just like funding the retirement of some geezer in Silicon Valley.
Right.
So it's like you can trade them, and maybe, you know, you have a couple good swings here or there, or you're doing like leverage or something, and you're really good at leverage, but long term, like all that stuff, it's trash. Bitcoin is the only real one, which I feel like is altruistic in a sense. Like Satoshi Nakamoto, like don't know who he is. I love that he's anonymous too. You know, 'cause I think it's like a metaphor that his idea is bigger than any one individual. You know what I mean? You can kind of like take a second.
As we ponder that for a second, because we're running out of time too. I have a question for you as someone who doesn't invest in crypto, doesn't really know that much, and I've learned a little bit about it over the last hour. If I wanted to get into crypto now, what would you recommend? Is there a place? Where do I even start?
The landscape is changing like pretty rapid in that a lot of exchanges are being taken down. So it's getting harder and harder to actually get like a fiat to crypto on-ramp where you can like put Canadian dollars, US dollars onto an exchange and buy stuff. There are some ones that are okay in Canada, like Newton or something like that. But as soon as you do like put money onto any of these exchanges, you want to take it off right away. You don't want to hold any money on these hot wallets. That's what they call them, because you don't actually own your private keys. Your private keys is like, that's how you access your funds, especially if one of these exchanges goes down. There's this famous one in Vancouver, that went down a couple of years ago. It's called Quadriga, and he, rugged like millions and millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin and ETH. I used to use Quadriga to buy my first Bitcoin, but you got to take it off. You got to put it into a private, your own wallet.
Yeah.
I would recommend, like, if you're just getting started and you're not using a lot of money, there's this good software called
I used Wealthsimple for a little bit.
Yeah, Wealthsimple though, you're still not holding your own coins.
Yeah, you're not.
So it's like any sort of regulation that happens and stuff, like they could like sell your coins for you and stuff,
Nice.
The one thing I don't understand is like, what kind of capital do you need to get started? Is this like do you need to spend money in order to? I still don't understand that.
Yeah, I mean, like it's all supply and demand, so you can use however much or little money, as you have or want to, buy into ETH or Bitcoin. You don't have to own a whole Bitcoin because that's pretty expensive. You don't have to own a whole Ethereum. You can buy like just a fraction of one, and it's extremely divisible as well, which is awesome. Yeah. So yeah, you can invest with as little as like $100 if you want to.
But that's like 0.0003 of a Bitcoin.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I think that's why there's a lot of like people who want to own like 1 million Shiba Inu. There's a big like psychological, I think it's called like the numbers bias, where it's like you want to own like 1 million of something as opposed to a fraction of something. It's not very sexy saying, oh, I own 0.01 Bitcoin. It's like, cool.
Yeah, you bitch ass.
But if you say, I have 1 billion Shiba Inu, it's like, oh, you're technically a billionaire?
Yeah. That's like, this guy's a big dick if you
yeah.
want to.
I think that's also one of the reasons just why like a lot of these alts kind of pop up.
Yeah. And that's a real thing probably, right?
100%.
100%, yeah.
That's a real thing, yeah.
People are stupid. People think that way, obviously. Yeah.
There's a lot of cults in crypto, absolutely.
What cult are you part of?
Cult of Bitcoin.
Cult of Bitcoin, yeah.
Yeah. It's almost like a religion.
I know you obviously can't answer this question because, like you said, there's a million different things that go into it, but what would you predict Bitcoin's value to be in 10 years?
10 years?
5 to 10 years. Because like you said, what they're
like
standing for is
400K.
bigger than what people think.
Yeah, 10 years, I think it'll be hit around like 400K US, around there. It goes through these cycles. So this is like I mentioned before, like the halving cycles where over time, fewer amount of Bitcoin are being emitted and put into the total supply. That has a big effect on the price of Bitcoin, right? Let's say you have 10,000 miners on the entire system, and they're all they're all burning electricity to maintain this network. As soon as those rewards get chopped in half, either miners have to leave the network or the price of Bitcoin has to go up, right? For them to stay profitable and to continue mining. And what usually happens in these 4-year cycles is that the price usually takes off. Can't guarantee that's always going to continue, but that's been the pattern for the past like 12 years. So that the next cycle kind of instigates the next like crypto bull run. And we've seen like 3 of these now. 4 of these.
To be honest, I'm an absolute caveman when it comes to this. So most of the things you said, I was using every single willpower in my brain to understand where it's coming from. But it's also hard for you to explain it in layman terms because it is such a complex thing that you can't really explain it in simpler terms than you just did.
It's,
right?
it's hard, yeah. There's just so many different topics that you really need to have like a good understanding of to really get the big picture. I can't stress that enough. Otherwise, you're not gonna have that same like faith, I guess.
Yeah, because a lot of people think knowing just the basics, just the sheer basics of Bitcoin and crypto is enough for them to invest and make a lot of, but that's not enough.
No, it's not really. Like, I thought I knew everything back in like 2016, 2017 when I first got in. And of course, I went down the rabbit hole of investing a ton of money into these like altcoins, thinking like the exact same reason before the numbers bias. I was like, oh, I can have like 1 million of these XRP coins. Like this technology, it's like faster transactions. It must be better than Bitcoin. But I really didn't get it back then. And you have to get like burned once, going through one cycle where you make a bunch of money, then you lose it all to really like start to understand, I guess. Yeah, hopefully people can listen to this and kind of like learn from my mistakes, I guess, in the past. And
yeah,
like I'd like to really get it though, you need to do your own research and like spend the time reading up on all the different aspects.
Yeah, just like historical things too about how currency works, just the trends
of
that
hard money, the
history of
fiat currency,
trends that have been happening over the past however many fucking years with currencies and different shit like that.
Yeah.
Well, man, this has been amazing. I've definitely learned a lot, although I'm gonna have to re-listen to this and like really like take some notes. Thank you, man. Christian, enjoy your 24, episode 49. If you want to plug anything right now.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you guys want to follow me at DefiSenpai on TikTok, that'd be awesome, or Instagram as well, defi.senpai. Yeah, give me a follow.
You know, this was great. Enjoy your 24, episode 49. If you learn anything from this, like, subscribe, share, comment, whatever you guys want to do. Appreciate all the support already that we're getting, and all the comments, all the hate comments, everything. Like I always say this, I love all of you guys. This was dope, man. Appreciate you.
All right. Peace.
Peace.